Good morning.
Welcome to the programme this morning. Thanks for joining us. Little change then from the First Minister at the review yesterday. Clearly that could change. Does yesterday's decision reflect sort of the current status then with statistics?
Yeah, I think so, Dash. I think there's probably some pros and cons of going from the 3-weekly review to the weekly review. Obviously, we're going into the kind of the winter period now, and things could change quite quickly. It's a respiratory virus, so even before the Omicron variant, you would expect the kind of the spread of COVID to increase at this time of year, in part because more people generally mix indoors. I suppose the con of having the weekly reviews is that there's probably less kind of certainty for some of the business sector, because when you obviously have them every 3 weeks, every week now people are going to be kind of wondering, are there going to be new restrictions? If you look at the stats at the moment, then we've seen consistently now for several weeks the number of COVID patients in hospital falling. So the First Minister is talking about the pressure on the NHS. It's actually been reduced from COVID in recent weeks. It's more the kind of non-COVID and the catch-up of everything from the last 18 months is putting kind of the extra strain on there. But with the Omicron variant kind of being more transmissible, it's looking like there is some caution out there at the moment with that. I think the important thing is what we've seen coming out of South Africa with this new variant is that whilst people are catching it quicker, fewer of those then go on to develop kind of serious symptoms which will need hospitalisation. So that's one of the positive things.
Yeah, it's difficult though, isn't it, Jamie? Because there's this sort of information deficit around the new variant, the Omicron variant, and then that makes it hard to predict any impact that it could have on the NHS here.
No, indeed, and let's remember now that the number of patients in hospital, is nearly 70% lower in COVID patients than this time last year. So, there's if they did start creeping up, even if they kind of doubled, we'd still have fewer patients in hospital than we did kind of last year, and they were going up, and they kind of peaked in January. So, the NHS did manage to finally cope last winter. It'll just be a kind of a challenge as we kind of see what's happening in Scotland and England. Do seem to be slightly ahead of Wales with the Omicron variant. We have seen a sharp rise in cases in Scotland over the last week. But remember as well, when we do see these cases rising in the next few weeks, we're in that period now where more and more people are doing more and more tests, and we saw exactly the same thing last December because people are taking tests, and when you tend to take tests, especially with some people who have no symptoms and they take a test and test positive, we are seeing at the last week cases going up across the UK by 10%, but tests have gone up 10% as well. So just remember that when you're interpreting the figures each day.
Yeah, it's all a balance, isn't it? Now, we've got the 13 cases of the Omicron variant in Wales that we know about, but the difficulty here, and we heard from the First Minister yesterday and health officials, that a lot of this sometimes is the unknown that's already out there.
Yeah, indeed, and it looks like Omicron spread across the world, and we've identified it coming out of South Africa, and it could have well been year before. There's some speculation was the COP26 kind of conference in Scotland a seed of that, because obviously officials were coming from all over the world, and they've all gone back as well. I think the interesting thing that came out of yesterday's press conference for me as well is that obviously Mark Trigger's encouraging people to take lateral flow tests every single day, and it is kind of question, I suppose, the vaccine pass, because if you've got a vaccine pass at the moment, you obviously can go to all of these different events, but is he kind of conceding there that the vaccine pass itself isn't doing the job that's stopping the spread and asking people to take lateral flow tests? So obviously the lateral flow test is a better way than the vaccine pass to know if you've got the kind of the virus at the moment. So I think some caution with what we need to do in the next few weeks. Yeah. But the situation is not what we were this time last year. That's one of the positive things going into Christmas.
Yeah, I was going to say that. We're in a much better place, aren't we? There's no doubt, because of the vaccines, and now people are getting their booster as well. How does it compare?
Yeah, so to say cases are going up, but when they were going up last year, the number of people in hospital was going up. The booster rollout is having an effect. We have seen across the country that with especially the elderly having kind of the booster vaccines first, that what we're seeing is that among older people, they're getting fewer cases in comparison to, say, younger people. It's generally the younger that's got the virus, especially school children. That's where it's seeding a lot. One of the positives going into the next few weeks as well, Tash, is that the schools will be closing, so that kind of acts as a mini fire break, I suppose, because every time we see the schools close, we do see an impact in reducing cases. So we probably wouldn't potentially need to go much further at the next review with the schools coming to a close, but obviously they'll be reviewing the figures each day.
Yeah, of course they will. We know ministers are taking it seriously. You felt that yesterday from Mark Drakeford. He said, we didn't expect or want to be here with this new Omicron variant. He'd hoped to see the back of the worst of the pandemic, and a shift now from these 3 weekly reviews, as we said, to the weekly ones. The modelling, though, the prediction for the spike in cases is next month in Wales.
Yeah, well, obviously it's going to be kind of the very early days of the Omicron variant. We might start seeing kind of cases in the UK because we've got very few restrictions compared to, say, this time last year where we were having fire breaks and lockdowns. We might start seeing cases significantly higher. But the important thing, which is what the health officials will be monitoring, is that the case numbers will become irrelevant if this new virus kind of variant is a lot milder, because ultimately it's going to be the pressure on the NHS and then obviously the sad deaths that come after it. It could be that, if you track pandemics over the last kind of few centuries, you always get new variants which tend to be milder, and then they kind of can be endemic, and you just, like the flu, we've had to learn with the flu over the 100 years. So this might be a positive thing, the Omicron variant. If it is more transmissible and less deadly, it could be that if it overtakes Delta, which is more deadly, then that could be a good thing as well.